Hi folks, welcome back to our second video for Chapter 12, Indirect Benefits. Here we're starting to look at employee services, and they could be things like employee assistance programs like counseling, wellness and recreational. That could be things like I mentioned earlier, yoga over the lunch hour. It could be even subsidized cafeterias could be part of that too, right? Because it's part of your wellness, especially if they stock it with healthy food, that kind of thing. Child and elder care services like built-in daycares, that kind of thing. Helping you to achieve a work-life balance. Some companies offer financial seminars on retirement and legal services, divorce, separation services, those kinds of things. And again, we already mentioned food services. Some companies consider it part of wellness if it's healthy foods they offer. Some people might give it as part of their just even having a cafeteria on site. Could be food services. It's kind of a service, so it's convenient, so you don't have to rush out on the lunch hour at break time. And outplacement services. In the event that you are displaced from your job, they might help. They might supply services to help you reacclimate into the workplace with another employer. So now, these are just some examples. They do talk about them in much greater detail in your textbook, but I think we all have examples of those that we might have come across in our own organizations. If you have any questions or comments once you read it, please feel free to post a note in the discussion boards or email me with any questions or concerns you have. Now, if we look at the different benefit systems that are in place, we have fixed, semi-flexible, and flexible benefit systems. So let's talk about each of them in turn. Now, if we look at fixed systems, those are ones whereby they will give you all standard packages of healthcare benefits that you need to buy. One of the biggest advantages of this kind of a system is that because employers are basically directing you on what to buy, everybody will be in them, and the employer will be able to get better economies of scale when they go to purchase, meaning that they're buying these benefits more in bulk because everybody's buying them, so they can get better premiums for you. Certainly they keep their administrative costs low because they're only administering the benefit programs that they say they're going to cover for you, and it's very easy to communicate the plan because people are more familiar with what the plan covers because they all have the same benefits. Now, having said that, most organizations are getting away from fixed plans because they're starting to realize that one size does not fit all. And people who are at different stage of their life, people who are younger versus people who are nearing retirement, people who have children versus those who don't, people who have work-life balance issues when it comes to looking after children or elder care issues, and those who don't, they have different needs. So most companies have tried to accommodate that by looking at semi-flexible or even totally flexible benefit systems. So what that means is that they might have a core set of benefits that everybody buys, and then add-on levels of coverage, so you can determine how much of that coverage you want to buy. So for example, we might offer some basic medical coverage for you, very basic. You can decide if you want the basic, if you want a family plan, which might be have more benefits or perks to it, right? And for which you'll pay more, regardless of the fact that there's more people. But even some companies now have couples plans. So say, for example, you are an employee, you only have a spouse, but you don't have children or any other dependents. I've seen many organizations now coming up with couples plans. So again, you won't pay as much as a family member because we don't necessarily expect the same volume of claims. But that's kind of the idea. So you can decide what else you want to buy and pay for that additional coverage. In some cases, some companies might share the cost, but we're finding more and more that where you decide to buy additional coverage or buy up the coverage, more and more companies are paying less and less of what you decide to buy up to. All right. You also have to bear in mind that when you're an employee, you're buying these benefits or paying these premiums with after-tax dollars, so they can become very expensive. So just remember how much it's costing you, and you have to sort of take an inventory for yourself to say, am I getting the bang for my buck, what I'm paying, right? If I buy over and above the core benefits that are offered. Some organizations have gone totally flexible. I'm a little more used to this system, to be honest, but again, when we look at private sector companies putting in plans, I tend to find that most public sector organizations are using semi-fixed plans. But here with a fully flexible one, what the organization does is they may give you credits. You can even liken the credit to, what you would have paid in premium. So it's like somebody's giving you a credit card with $1,500 on it and said, go shopping, buy whatever benefits you want. But there is a limit to what you can spend. So some companies refer to these as healthcare spending accounts. But they are part of a flexible benefit system whereby you can decide what you want to buy in terms of benefits. So for example, you want dental, but you don't want orthodontics, right? You might want healthcare, but there might be some things you don't want. Maybe you don't want out of country coverage. Maybe you find, oh, I'll get that cheaper at CAA or wherever you might buy it from. Some people don't realize you even have out of country coverage on your credit cards. It may not be to the same extent, but maybe you want to, as you might get if you bought it through your company. But, some people might say, well, I'll take the risk, So that would be up to you. Maybe you don't want that coverage. So you can spend your money on something else. So coverages you don't buy, you might choose to spend your money somewhere else. So it's totally flexible, but you are limited to what you have to spend. Right? Now, most of us would say, hey, those ideas are kind of neat. They all sound pretty good to me. What's the experience with some of these things? Well, we have had experience with flexible benefit systems, but let's just talk a little bit about their origin first. Interestingly enough, they did begin in the United States when employers were realizing, hey, healthcare costs are getting high. We found that there's, in the States anyway, there's more favorable tax treatment than there is in Canada. But the fact that the flexibility was there and people could buy what they wanted, I think was a big push that companies made in terms of this is a major factor why we think it's important to you. Because right now you might be paying for benefits you don't use. So what a lot of employers did before they put in flexible benefit plans is many of them started to survey their employees and say, well, what benefits do you these are the benefits you have, which ones are you using? And I think employees started to see, hey, you know what, I got a lot of benefits here that I'm paying for, even though the employer might be paying part, I'm not using a lot of them. Or there might be some I'm using more than others. Maybe a flexible plan would be great for me. So these are just some statistics here, but I think, although they're not as tax favorably treated here in Canada, I think the idea that you can pick what you want had certain appeal, and I think companies kind of put that in your face when you looked at what you were paying for and what you were using versus, hey, I could be using that money somewhere else. So I think that flexibility system or that thinking made them catch on here in Canada as well. So what is our experience here in Canada? To be honest, they've taken off in the past 20 years. There has been kind of a plateauing of it though, probably in many cases because a lot of employers coming on the scene now are smaller employers and maybe they don't offer flexible benefit systems to the same extent because they're too costly to offer. But what we found, interestingly enough, is that there's very little definitive research findings that we can really point to. On whether or not they've really been successful and how valued they are to employees. Some studies that we've done, when we look at the impact on employee satisfaction with their compensation, while we don't have anything definitive, we do know of some relationships. Some research indicates that employee satisfaction with flexible benefit plans really depends on whether they believe the plan has reduced their benefits. So if people are perceiving that having a flexible benefit program or package has really reduced the benefits that they really need, or they're not getting as good a deal as they were getting before, whether it's in the variety of coverage, the depth of the coverage, or whatever, they might not be as happy with them. And other research says that employee satisfaction with a flex system depends on the degree to which the company provides them with decision-making support. So sometimes employees don't know what to pick, and they're relying on the company to provide them with some data or some facts to help them make their decision. So there's a wide variety of things that impact the degree to which employees are satisfied with their plan. But one thing I will tell you, I directed a compensation employee benefits program for years, and I will tell you, definitely when you're looking at making changes to your plan or looking at updating plans in any way, always better to survey your employees and find out what they feel they'd get the most benefit from, because it's very, very important to be in on the ground floor with what your employees want. Don't think you as the employer know, because you may be putting things or giving them options to buy things that may be totally irrelevant to a significant part of your employee complement. So you need to make sure you know what your employees are looking for. So you can never over survey employees when it comes to trying to find out what they need or what they want. Now, if we look at designing benefit plans, we have to look at 5 things. Determine what's the role that indirect pay is going to play in our compensation strategy. So your indirect pay, again, includes your benefits. How are we going to redesign the plan? How are we going to identify what benefits we want to include, and is it going to be flex, semi-flex, or structured or fixed with only core? What kind of structure are we going to offer for benefits? Are we going to offer co-pays or deductibles? What's the depth of the coverage? Are we as the employer going to pay 85%, 15% of whatever the submission is? What's going to happen? And we have to develop procedures for administering, communicating, and evaluating the plan. So if we looked, first of all, at determining the role of indirect pay, we need to start looking at what are some of those desired behaviors that we want our indirect pay system to bring about in our employees. So we need to go back to what we talked about very early on in the course, the role that a benefits plan or a compensation plan has in motivating employees and retaining employees. So for example, what are some of the roles that an indirect pay plan can fill? Well, do we want to encourage membership? Do we want to encourage people to stay, to join? Do we want to encourage retention? Do we want to satisfy lower level needs, maybe the safety, security needs of employees? Do we want to promote strategically significant behaviors? Do we want people, so for example, do we want people to get involved in continuing education, taking courses, doing training in special areas where we're developing and growing in? So what is it that you want to do, right? So sometimes this pay for time not worked, putting them in training programs is very good, right? So it depends on which way you want to go with your organization. What about choosing the process for plan design? Well, as I said before, employee participation is very important. So if you're thinking that you want to look at other options for offering different plans, you might want to test that out on your employees and see how amenable they might be to changing things, what kind of value they think they're getting out of their current plan, and what kind of an appetite your employee body has for change. Number 3, identifying the benefit system and the benefits to be included. So again, we want to consider the extent to which the benefits contribute to the role of indirect pay, how much those benefits that we might add are valued by employees, and what the cost would be to adding these particular benefits, and what would it cost the company, right? So whenever we're looking at what it's going to cost us, we also have to decide what do employees want, because we certainly want our compensation system to be motivating. We also have to look at how much we're prepared to contribute. So how is it going to be funded? So how much should be covered? Are we going to have deductibles, co-pays? Who's going to be eligible? Some companies, because dental is so expensive, I notice some companies are making their employees wait 3 to 6 months to join dental, just because of the cost. It's not just the cost of going up to the employee, it's going up for the employer as well. So sometimes we find we might have waiting periods because of the cost of the benefit. And again, we want to make sure that we have procedures in place to administer the plan, to communicate, as well as to evaluate the program. What we tend to find in this last item here, when we look at how we're going to administer, communicate, and evaluate the plan, in the administration area, we have found that flexible systems, flexible benefit systems, have been very, very expensive, because most of the times companies don't want you to change partway through the year. So for example, we find that with flex benefit systems, including semi-flex systems, companies might say, well, we're only going to give you a short window of time within which to update your benefit coverage if you want to make changes. In many companies, they do it at the beginning of the year, just after New Year's, right? So you might have to get on and say, you know, what benefit changes you want, and they will give you a relatively short window of time within which to make your changes. And if you don't make it by that time, then you have to stay with the plan you have for the next year. The reason they do that is because of the administrative costs. Don't forget, people might be buying different things. So to make a change for one person and have to make a change for 2001 persons, that could be a lot of work. We allow it for one, we got to allow it for everybody. So because the plans are so custom and specific to individual needs, there's a lot of cost in administering them, so you might not get the flexibility of changing as often as you want. Certainly make sure you communicate the benefit that your employees are getting from their indirect plans. So what we used to do with some of our, and we found it effective, is that where employees still got like their pay deposit advice, their pay slips, how your company might deposit your pay into your account, but you might get through e-post an electronic pay slip, or you might still get a hard copy one. We used to print down there what employees are paying for their coverage and what we were paying as an employer for their coverage. So we used to summarize it in the bottom of that, and that was good because the people would then start to realize, hey, the company is paying quite a bit for my benefits, not just me, but they are paying quite a bit too. So you come to appreciate what the company is doing for you, and certainly evaluating your coverages. So in other words, are there coverages that employees have purchased that may or may not be used as much? So the idea here is that you as the employer won't know what any one of your employees has purchased because it's privacy, it's confidential, right? But your healthcare plan provider could tell you that, in certain age categories, or certain service categories, people tend to be using more of this benefit than that benefit. So maybe there's an opportunity for us to redesign the plan. But again, when you're doing that and you're trying to make changes to your plan, never, ever, ever leave your employees out. Always get them or give them an opportunity to be surveyed and to contribute to whatever changes you might make. Now, if we look at evaluating and adapting your system, we have to look at three main areas. We have to do a cost analysis, right? So what's the cost of each benefit versus what are we getting for that benefit? So is that the most cost-effective benefit to be offering our employees? But you have to make that decision too. You have to decide, am I getting value from that benefit or not? Maybe you're not using it. And you might decide, well, I can always change it next year if I don't use it, so maybe I won't buy eyeglass coverage. Maybe, so who knows what you're going to do, right? So you have to look at that kind of stuff. We have to, as an employer, do a competitive analysis. We don't want to offer so little in indirect benefits or too much, so that we have people that come to us and never leave because we're so fabulous, right? So we might want to see if we could lay our hands on some competitor data. Usually you won't get it by specific competitor, but an employee benefits consultant who's done benefit surveys for organizations in the past may be able, for a fee, to share some of that information with you without identifying their client, so you can see whether or not your benefit package as it stands is cost effective and competitive. And again, we want to maybe do benefit surveys. So again, look to your employees, all right? Look to consulting firms to see what other people in your geographic area, what other organizations in your industry are doing, just to make sure that you keep giving your employees value. And certainly within this, make sure you keep surveying your employees to find out whether or not they continue to believe they're getting value. So now, our last slide, as you might have expected, get ready for what's due this week and next week, and make sure you plan to get things in on time. Post your discussion boards if your boards are still open. And again, we're at the end of our time together in our course. So make sure that you've started to study, that you have an idea of the layout and the format of the final exam. If you don't, make sure you look at your instructor's posting. I know I've posted stuff. If you're not sure, send me an email or post it on your discussion board if you're not sure. But have a great week and good luck on the exam, and I hope to hear from many of you. It's been my pleasure to instruct you. I hope you enjoyed the course and have a super week.